everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be recommending some of my favorite atmospheric novels. These books can kind of fall across a variety of different genres, but all of them kind of have this dark, mystery, sweeping, beautiful narrative that kind of has like great ambiance and just have this like really inescapable immersive quality about them. It's one of my favorite types of writing styles to come across. They often utilize a lot of my favorite book tropes and just like literary elements, so atmospheric, weird, dark novels are just kind of my jam. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the recommendations. The first book I'm going to chat about is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is a very popular novel and to me just like perfectly fits within this type of story. If you want a beautiful and haunting tale that'll just grip you from page one and kind of honestly make you a little terrified, this is the book for you. The novel is set in Spain in 1945, shortly after the events of the Spanish Civil War. The country is obviously still reeling from this conflict, and we follow our main character living in Barcelona, and as a young boy he stumbles upon this book with his father, The Shadow of the Wind. He reads it, he's immersed by it, he loves every single second of it. So when he decides he wants to check out other books by this author, he begins to research and realizes that all his other works have been destroyed, and it seems like someone is out there systematically destroying all of his copies. Even more than that, he might possess the last copy of his last book ever. And when he realizes this, he's basically kind of thrown into the dark underworld of this like Spanish secret book society. There's murder, there's intrigue, but again, the historical setting of this is just absolutely stunning. The writing style and the mystery is both eerie and gripping. It's just astonishing. The writing is just so good. And it's just one that will just like suck you right into the book, and it's just one that's gonna like pull you right in and not let you go until you figure out what the world is going on. It's great. Also, just like books about books are like something that also I'm a sucker for, so this is great. The book I'm going to talk about is Midwinter Blood, and now this is a story that does something that I'm also a huge fan of. It kind of has all of these different perspectives throughout a huge expanse of time, and each perspective kind of chats through a different love story, and as you're going through them you realize that while there might be like centuries and millennium apart, they're somehow all connected, and they're connected through this one single place. It's really dark, it's very mysterious. The writing is also very lyrical and beautiful, and it'll pull you right in. It's a bizarre book, but one that I feel like is very successful in kind of weaving all these different stories together. And there's something just really enchanting about a single place in time being the route through all of these people's lives and experiences that just makes it such a great story. It's one I haven't read in a while, and one that I feel like I should reread soon. This author I have a soft spot for. I really like his other works, Revolver, among many others. All of them kind of have this dark, gripping quality to them. This feeling of hearing this tale that seemingly has been passed down through time, like one that you would hear around like a campfire, and you just kind of like passed upon this person who just has all these stories and it feels like it relates to your life, and it's just this whole mysterious quality. That's what all of his books kind of feel like, if you know what I mean. But this one I feel like is my favorite of his, and in this one I feel like he's really mastered this multi-layered narrative quality that is just so great, which is why I'm recommending it. The next book I'm going to chat about is The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Lavender. If you're looking for a book in this video with just the most exceptionally delightful writing, this is the book to pick up. This is one that's a very lovely tale, but also a very dark tale. This essentially follows Lavender and her family through time seems to be cursed when it comes to love. On top of that, it seems like every woman within Ava's family has some sort of peculiar magical disposition. One thing or another kind of makes them slightly alternative to everyone else around them, and in Ava's case, she was born with wings. Throughout the story, she's kind of uncovering and kind of digging into her own family history to try to figure out why everyone in her family has been cursed when it's come to love. And also this story is paralleled with kind of her own harrowing love story, and Ava basically has to confront that not everyone has the best intentions, and she's kind of perhaps naive in what the world is expecting for her, especially because she's born with these wings. It's a really beautiful tale. It's haunting, but one that has stunning writing, really lovely characters. This is a book that's really stayed with me ever since I've read it about 4 years ago, and one that I just continually recommend because I just found the narrative so gripping. So this is one to pick up. The book I'm going to chat about is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is a new release in a very popular book by a very popular author whom I feel like is very well known for this atmospheric lyrical writing style book, so it seems very fitting to include this. This is another book lover, literary inspired book mystery situation, so I feel like if you're intrigued by The Shadow of the Wind, you will also like this book, as I've read both and found while these two books are very different from each other from a plot perspective, like the book love at its core is one that you'll find in both. But this is a story where we follow our main character who basically is at his university library one day. He pulls out this random book off the shelf, and in this book he begins to just read all these different stories about all these different people through time. They're kind of nestled within each other, and there's love, loss, and all of that. And he's kind of thrown off because while he's reading it, he uncovers a chapter from his own life, and this kind of obviously turns his whole world upside down because he's like, how does this book know who I am? And then he kind of finds himself in the middle of these fighting book secret societies, and he's kind of on this quest to find the Starless Sea. This is just a story that kind of combines the love of this like secret societies, books, and magic, and like love through time. Kind of hard to describe, but it does also have really exceptional writing. And it's really a layered story. Like things constantly are called back to each other. So there's like little vignettes that are kind of blown up and reflect the larger story as well. It's one that will really kind of keep you guessing and pulling you through to the end. And it just has these like wonderful metaphors come to life. It's just something that is very lovely, and I feel like fits this atmospheric book recommendation very well. So if you want like a Romeo and Juliet through time, through different people, this is something you might want to consider picking up. This wouldn't be this video if I didn't recommend the Bear and the Nightingale series, because this to me is one of my favorite atmospheric fantasy books of all time. I feel like it combines so many wonderful historical elements with fantasy elements and like folklore all intertwined in the most luscious fantasy tale ever. This is a historical fantasy series set in like 15th, 16th century Russia. We follow our main character Vasya, and in the first one, she's basically living in her father's compound, and basically in her father's compound, her family and the families that live around her both practice Orthodox Christianity and also folklore traditional religion as well. However, when Vasya's father gets remarried after the death of her mother, his new wife is very devout and kind of vows to get rid of any type of reference to folklore within their village. When this happens though, like a dark power begins to encroach on Vasya and her family, and it's kind of up to her to embrace her magic and save the day. In the first one, it's truly about Vasya as a young child, but throughout the entire series, you follow her growing up and kind of interacting with all this like folklore magic and the rich like landscape of Russia. It's cold, it's warm, like the seasonal aspects of this series, you just feel everything. Like if you want to feel cold, this is a series to pick up because you will feel it in your toes. But if you want to feel like the rushing water, like this is another one to really check out as well. Catherine Arden's ability to describe landscapes is like unparalleled. Not only does the series have beautiful magical ambiance, but historical ambiance as well is just top notch. Catherine Arden just doesn't use the historical setting as a sort of backdrop to all the action that's happening within this series, but instead uses it as an integral part of the plot, societal expectations, family expectations, and a lot of things that Vasya and her siblings have to go through all kind of mirror the expectations of the and it just adds wonderful historical momentum to the story as well. And I mean, seeing Vasya not only have to overcome the magical struggles, but the struggles of being a woman within the 16th century political, you know, time period as well. It's just absolutely fascinating and wonderfully done. This book should also really be no surprise, and that is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novak, another richly like historically influenced magical fantasy book set in Russia. I clearly have some buzzword soft spots when it comes to book synopsises. It obviously pays off because so many of these books are my favorites, and I just love a Russian fairy tale fantasy book. I am who I am. This is actually a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, but it's set in Russia also in like 15th, 16th, 17th century, and you're really following the stories of three girls coming from very different places in society. One of the girls is very well bred and comes from a rich family. However, her only real job and expectations as a young female within this time period is to marry rich. However, she's not the most beautiful, so she's been really kind of disgraced by her family because of it. Follow another girl who is the daughter of a Jewish moneylender. She obviously faces a lot of prejudice both for her faith, but also because of her father's occupation. However, when her father kind of is honestly very bad at his job, she kind of takes over as the moneylender, and that's kind of where you follow her story. And the last girl we follow is the daughter of a farmhand who's very abusive. She's constantly trying to kind of escape that life and find and carve a new road for herself. This is truly a story of like 3 women from 3 different places, whose stories kind of collide in the most unexpected and brilliant of ways, but truly about them taking power back for themselves and all of their different like roles and responsibilities. You see them rise up to the challenge and take it for themselves, like taking no names. It's so beautifully written, so wonderfully done. You fall in love with everyone and you're just rooting for them. There's also romance and magic, and of course like winter ambiance set in Russia. There's sleigh rides across like the frozen landscape, but there's also money to be had and money to be stolen, and these girls are taking all of it for themselves. I love it. I love this book. I need to reread this book. It's like one of my favorite books of all time. And the last book I'm gonna chat about and recommend today is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. This is a YA fantasy series that just is so unique, and it has everything to do with its world. It's just whimsical and magical and just like nothing I've ever encountered before. This is actually a French translation, and it's a story that you really can tell that it's pulled its influences from so many different places. Talking about like Christianity to Greek mythology to Roman mythology to, you know, all sorts of different places and sources through history and time. It's all kind of mashed together in the coolest like reinterpretation in this magical world. But in this book we follow our main character who honestly just wants to live an unimportant life, just wants to run her museum and live undisturbed from everyone in her family. In this magical world there are basically different kingdoms floating in the sky called spires. Each of these spires have different makeups, different political systems, and each of these spires is also ruled by sort of a family ancestor where like the origin of their magic and family history is all rooted from. Our main character's Ophelia's case, her family ancestor is Artemis. To kind of give you an idea of like where the ties can come from, her case is Greek mythology. Ophelia also has a certain set of interesting powers. One, she can touch objects and see their entire history as well as everyone who's kind of touched them along the way. And 2, she can walk through mirrors. Throughout the beginning of the story, she's constantly turning down her family's desire for her to get married, and kind of as a last straw, they negotiate her hand in marriage to a far off spire, to a very powerful political figure there. The other spire is very different from her home one. It's like the politics are a lot more intense, a lot more dramatic, and the magic is a lot more ruthless. As well as Ophelia herself is kind of quiet and doesn't really like to speak very much or really involve herself in like pretty much anyone else's lives because she's really just, you know, focused on what she's doing. Within this story, we see her kind of dropped in this very tumultuous political situation and try to navigate it herself and kind of come into her own power. She's quiet, but that doesn't mean she's not fierce or like independent or curious or intelligent. And you kind of see her work through all of that within this series. There's also a very peculiar type of romance, but truly like the magic of this series is the spires and all of this bizarre and dark magic that is surrounding everything. There's illusions, there's power struggles, and there's also just this richly unique fantasy world at the center of it all that you're just trying to unpack and understand how it works. Between the first 2 books that are out and translated in English from French, I have just been, you know, like sucked in from day one. I love this series so much, and I just cannot wait for all the rest of the books to be translated because I cannot put it down. Alrighty guys, so those are my atmospheric book recommendations. Let me know down below some books you love that are atmospheric, because we all know I'm constantly looking for other ones to check out. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!